The mix of unpredictable bug bounty with stable pentesting can give you a really good balance. And while I talk about bug bounty a lot, in this video we'll talk about pentesting, how to become a pentester, how to find clients for pentesting, and of course the pentest methodology. My guest today is Cristi Vlad. Enjoy! So, hello Cristi, thank you so much for joining me in today's podcast. For those of you who don't know you, can you please tell us a bit about your background and where are you currently at?
Sure, definitely. Hi, Greg. So I'm going to probably try to be short and I'm trying to catch the essence. So formally or by education, I haven't followed or I don't think that most of or a lot of the people in cybersecurity have not started via an educational or an education in cybersecurity background. And I'm a civil engineer by education. So I did a bachelor's and a master's in civil engineering, constructions engineering, and about 8 or 9 years ago. So I didn't actually work in the field because as I was still studying, my interests have changed. So while I was doing my master's, my interests have changed. So about 8 or 9 years ago, I started getting into Python, and that also a little after that, I became interested in cybersecurity. So that's how it all started. Python, cybersecurity. Then I started doing for a very short period of time, I did some challenges. There was VulnHub back then. You had to, I guess it probably is, you had to install the vulnerable machine on your system and actually try to get into it.
Yeah, I remember it was a very difficult part when you had to install the machine and configure the network properly to access it from Burp.
Yeah, that was a very short period for me. Then another very short period was when Hack the Box started all out. So I was on Hack the Box ever since it started, but I was there only for a short period of time, maybe a couple of months. Did a bunch of machines there. And then I tried, as I can remember now, I believe I tried to get into the field, like into the real world as soon as possible. I didn't want to waste, not necessarily waste. I didn't want to spend time in the theoretical realm, like on the side. I wanted to actually see how things work in the real world. So yeah, I guess this is a very short intro, but you can ask whatever follow-up questions you have.
Yeah, so tell me, how did you start with bug bounty and pen testing? What was first?
It was pen testing. Yeah, pen testing. I think I started with that more on, there was an opportunity locally here, and I actually followed that opportunity. I worked with the local company here doing their cybersecurity thing. And that was in their offices. That was for a couple of months back in 2018, I guess, 2017, 2018. And that's how it all started. I saw how things work in the real world. And after that came other opportunities. Most of them have been online. So yeah, most of them, 100% of them have been online as far as I can tell.
Yeah, and how did you then get interested in bug bounties?
I guess I started hearing about bug bounties 2019, 2020. I don't even actually remember exactly. I think that when I took my OSCP, yeah, so I can look at that certificate. It's 2019. As I got the OSCP, the very same month, I believe it was August 2019, the very same month, I started doing some program online. I learned about the platforms. I learned about, back then, HackerOne and Backrowd were the go-to. But I didn't spend time on those platforms. And I think I focused, as far as I can remember, I focused finding programs on Google using
So
different
just
keywords.
self-hosted ones.
Yeah, and then
Okay.
then I focused on getting into Synack. And that's actually how I believe it was 2020 or 2019 when I got into Synack. That's where my focus went, but I didn't do a lot of bounties, and I don't spend a lot of time on bug bounties
Yeah,
right now.
from what I know, you focus much more on pen tests these days.
Yeah, I mean, it could be 90% pen testing. So that's the majority of my working time, 90% pen testing, and maybe 10% or less in bug bounties. And I mean, I'm focusing on only one program and one platform. Right now, I'm solely on integrity. Like 99% of my bug bounty time is on integrity, one program, and then the rest of 1% is divided into all other programs on all other platforms. So it's non-significant.
Yeah, that's not a bad deal that you just have one program that you come back to. You're probably the expert of it, and I imagine you just like hacking there.
Yeah, so looking back I started looking into this program in 2023, and I actually have a list where I keep all my submissions, and I sent about 70 or 80,
Oh wow,
70 something, 70 submissions to the program this
yeah, that's a
year.
lot. Must be a huge
Yeah,
one.
and I mean, I love it. I love their product. It's I don't know. It just feels right.
Yeah, that's great. And about pen testing, are you employed? Are you a freelancer? How do you do pen tests?
So I operate as a business. I'm not employed. I'm not a freelancer. So I actually have collaborators. I have other businesses that I work with. I have main collaborators that I've been working with for about 2 or 3 years now. So they bring I mean, the majority of the pen tests are brought by them. So I don't have to worry about going to people, but there are people that approach me. So those are the majority of, as I said, the majority of my pen tests come from my main collaborators, but there are others that people approach me
Okay.
on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and then those are also part of my main work.
Okay, so isn't this freelancing? Because you said you're not a freelancer. To me, it sounds a bit like freelancing.
Well, I don't like to, maybe that part of it, but I don't like to call myself a freelancer because I think the long-term collaboration that I have with these
Okay.
businesses, and the fact that they actually, in freelancing, you don't know when you have, I think that in freelancing, you don't know when you have the next project, how long is it gonna last. But in what I do, I have sort of a certain certainty that I'm gonna have ongoing work. So I don't have to worry about that.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. So you told
Maybe
us
it's
that.
freelancing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a naming. I'm not really strict about naming things anyway. But you also told me that people approach you on LinkedIn, on Twitter. Why do people approach you, and how other pen testers can also attract people to approach them about pen tests?
Well, from my perspective, I think it's a very clear answer to this. People approach you when they see that you know something. So oftentimes I post about stuff. I'm quite active on Twitter and also on LinkedIn, basically posting the same things on both platforms. So I actually post about stuff that I'm doing, so other people actually see maybe connections on LinkedIn that are managers or own companies. They see that I post stuff about pen testing, findings, all that stuff, and they actually approach me if I want to look into their assets, for example, their apps, their infrastructure. So it's about sort of like establishing presence, establishing solid presence on platforms. That's also due to my YouTube channel. Back in the days, I used to post my videos on these platforms, and people will look at the videos and approach me due to the videos. They saw that I know something, and they wanted to see if I can help them in one way or another.
Yeah. So basically, you just put yourself out there, and you show people that basically what you do. So if someone watches us who maybe just starts learning cybersecurity and they feel like they would like to be out there and show things to people, but they kind of feel that they cannot do it because they do not know enough. In this case, if someone is actually just learning cybersecurity, do you think they can still put something out there to the internet to see?
Yeah, definitely. Let's take, for example, I don't know, maybe their learning journey. Maybe they're at the very beginning of their learning journey. They're using a platform like TryHackMe, Hack the Box, or whatever other platform, Web Security Academy. They could simply post about, hey, look, I went through this challenge on I went through this learning path on Web Security Academy. I did this exercise and I learned this. They could do a short post, maybe on LinkedIn or on Twitter, or they could write something on Medium or Substack or whatever other platform, write about their experience and then post it out there. Do that multiple times and people are going to start coming to you.
Yeah. And you also mentioned here a lot of platforms. You mentioned Twitter, the Substack, the blog post. How do you think they should choose on which platform to post stuff? Or maybe they should also do a YouTube video.
Definitely. I mean, YouTube brought me a lot of opportunities. So, but most people are actually more comfortable writing something than starting to put themselves out there. When I first started doing YouTube videos back in 2015, I did videos on Python and on AI. And only afterwards, I began doing cybersecurity videos. So it's not easy to start on YouTube. And a significant portion of people in cybersecurity are geared towards introversion. So I don't think it's easy, especially if you account for that. But to get back to your question, doing posting on one of these blog platforms, I'd say Medium, but you have to be careful because on Medium, if you want to reach a broader audience, you should not be tempted on choosing their monetization for your writings. Because if you do that, most people or a lot of people from my experience as a reader on Medium are not actually going to be able to read your stuff because it's only going to show a short chunk from the video. And if you want to read more, you'd have to pay $1 on Medium per month. And a lot of people aren't willing to pay 1 or 10 or however their subscription is. Make sure you opt out of their
even if it would be a once, even if it was 1 cent, people will just not add their credit card.
It's not
so
worth
just paywalling is paywalling. Most people won't go through it.
It's not worth it. For now, Substack is free, from what I know. Medium is also, so I actually opted out of the monetization on Medium, and whatever I post on there, it's anyone can read. right now. Maybe they'll change this in the future. But yeah, put yourself out there and do it frequently. That's probably the gist of the question.
Yeah, and speaking maybe more specific about resources, what do you think would be a good learning path if you wanted to get into cybersecurity today as a, I don't know, 20-something-year-old computer science student?
Depending on what you want to focus on. So, you mean as a bug bounty hunter?
Well, the problem is the hypothetical person we are talking about doesn't know this yet.
Exactly. So that's when you have platforms like, for example, TryHackMe with their very introductory paths, learning paths. There's pre-security, I guess. There's intro to cybersecurity. That's where you get exposure with the multitude of careers or subfields in cybersecurity that you could pursue. I would go with that to actually get a bit of clarity on where I want to move, because cybersecurity is a very, very large field today. So it's not all about pen testing or bug bounty hunting. There's a lot of stuff that you can do. So start with getting clarity on who you want to be in the field.
Yeah,
Afterwards, I mean, it's more simple.
yeah. That's a great answer. And let's come back a little bit to pen testing and to finding clients. So let's say that all the clients that you have that you are working with just leave you today. They just write you an email today. You don't work together anymore. How do you find clients for 2024?
Well, exactly how I told you a few moments ago. So I would actually, maybe I would focus a little bit more on bug bounties. Not maybe, probably. I'll probably
Yeah,
focus a little bit more on bug bounties and actually post about my findings. And I'm pretty sure that if I grow a network on LinkedIn and on mostly on LinkedIn probably, people are actually going to start asking me questions. Not only so, it's very likely that I'm going to be approached by other people who want to become better in cybersecurity, so other pen testers, but I'm also going to be approached by potential businesses, potential interesting or interested clients.
yeah,
That's what I would do. I would actually do bug bounties, and then have an ongoing stream of posts about my findings.
yeah. That definitely seems like a winning strategy. Have you tried
I
like,
wouldn't I
yeah,
wouldn't go about the formal route, such as applying to companies, applying to. I wouldn't do that. I would not apply or send jobs or send resumes on LinkedIn, because it's very unlikely that you're gonna get in front of the person that makes decisions. You want the person that makes decisions approaching you, not you trying to approach them. Because if you try to approach them, if you try to approach a business that's hiring pen testers, you're first probably gonna encounter HR people. A lot of them are not very experienced in cybersecurity and cannot actually assess or evaluate what you can do. Afterwards, if you pass the HR, you're gonna have multiple rounds of interviews. It's probably not the best. It's possible, but it's probably not the best path that you want to follow. You want people to come to you. That's because you're in a position of good negotiation if people come to you.
yeah, and
You
also
can operate more
like
on your terms. Go
let
ahead.
me know your thoughts about this, because you're from Romania, I'm from Poland. These are countries with relatively lower cost of living and also lower earnings than, for example, US. And I'm obviously not actively pursuing a job now, but when I did, I felt like when you just send a resume to a company, even if it's like a global remote company like GitLab, the salary they're going to offer you will be comparable with other salaries in the same country. So let's say a Polish salary, which is probably like half of this, which what you can get in US. And if you want to get a salary from a country like US or Germany or whatever, I feel like the only way to do it is by networking and by approaching people directly.
Definitely. So I can see this. It's probably normal and common sense for companies to offer salaries based on your position. But like I said earlier, it's since you're in the negotiations, you want, first of all, you want to position yourself, you want to see yourself as a global player here.
Yeah.
So you should probably see yourself as a global entity, global person, and maybe you want to set yourself, or maybe you want to have expectations, of course, depending on your skills, because if your skills are good, if you have good skills, you can ask whatever you want. This doesn't mean that you're going to get whatever you want. You have to have some common sense, because if like the median global range for a pen tester starting a good one would be $50 an hour, you wouldn't want to ask $250 an hour, because nobody's going to give that to you. You have to know, first of all, you have to know the industry. And I believe that a very large portion of cybersecurity people aspiring and actual pen testers don't know their worth and don't know the exact industry right now. This could be probably due to the fact that not everyone is transparent on how much they make. Numbers are not quite public. Some of them are, but you do get a feel for how much a certain person with a certain year of experience is worth. So if someone comes to me, if a company approaches me and asks or says that they can pay $30 an hour or $20 an hour because they know that would be a good money. So I'm hypothetically speaking, because they know that would be good money for Romania, I'm just going to say, no, thank you. And it depends on how the conversation goes afterwards. If they're just looking for someone to fill a position, they're actually going to keep looking. But if there's someone who's actually interested in me personally, and there is that situation as well. We've seen examples of companies that want a certain type of person on them. Like, for example, I think, moving a bit from cybersecurity, I think that, and most people are not going to know the name, I think that OpenAI pursued Andrew Karpathy, who's a very big name in AI, to go back to OpenAI after it had left a couple of years ago, because they knew this person was worth whatever he was worth. So the company pursued a specific person, an individual, into their company. So it depends. It's very contextual.
Yeah. I also didn't know this name, I admit, and I suspect a lot of our audience as well. But yeah, that's true, and that's a really good position. Like sometimes we talk about maybe negotiation strategies and things like this, but it always starts from a point where you position yourself before the negotiation even begins. And as I said, like the differences here in your positioning can have much greater impact than you negotiating 10% more than someone else with worse negotiation skills can get.
Exactly. So you have to know where you stand, what is your skill level, and what are your expectations, what are your real expectations, and also what are the expectations that could be um, seen or deemed as reasonable by the other party. So you could say that you're worth $100 an hour, for example, for a pen tester, but the majority of the companies approaching you think that you're only worth $40 an hour. So you have to actually understand whether or not they are right or you are right, or whether or not the truth is somewhere in the middle. So very contextual.
Yeah. Yeah, but so let's assume we already have a client for a pen test. Can you talk me through the whole process from the initial contact to what happens after the pen test?
Yeah. So of course you have the scope. The client tells you exactly what they want. Most of them know, because you're not actually talking to, or in my experience, I'm not actually talking to the owner of the business unless the owner approaches me. It's a small company, or the owner approaches me on LinkedIn and wants me to look into their stuff. But for the majority of pen tests, you're actually interacting with another person, another cybersecurity person from their company, or maybe a technical manager, or maybe a developer, or someone who actually has an idea of what they want. They give you the scope. They tell you, we want to test this app strictly. And you want to make sure that you specifically understand the scope so that you're always on the target. Afterwards, once you establish the scope, of course, there's the contract, there's all the paperwork that needs to be done, which in most cases, I don't deal with all the papers. My
How do you handle
collaborators
it?
do. My collaborators and the client.
Okay.
But there are a significant number of situations when I have to deal with everything, especially when clients actually approach me. So disregarding the paperwork, once you have the scope, the scope and the duration of the pen test. Of course, you have established the pricing for the pen test. You usually, I mean, this is very customizable. There are many situations when companies say, we only have this budget for pen testing. What can we do with it?
Okay.
And you having experience from other pen tests, knowing how much your time is worth, you can say, well, look, we could do this for that amount of money. So it often goes like that, because not all the companies have unlimited budgets for cybersecurity, even though I feel that it's still an overlooked area. And we can see leaks, data breaches happening every day. We can see ransomware every day going rampant. So people, companies, businesses are not paying enough attention to cybersecurity. But to get back to the main point, you establish the price, the scope, the duration, you test, you write a report, you deliver it to the client. It often involves ongoing back and forth clarifications, oftentimes check their fixes. And of course, if you have a business oriented perspective, you want to over deliver and under promise so that the client comes back to you at a later time.
Okay. And how to make the process before, when the pen test is already, when you're already talking with a client, how to make this process smooth of like giving credentials, creating the environment? Because from my experience back when I worked, it was always a problem with credentials and everything, and it caused delays, and it was always very difficult.
Yeah, exactly. So that's still a problem. Whenever we get new clients, that's one of our first requirements. Are we talking about an application with multiple roles, with accounts, can we get the accounts ourselves? Can we self-register? Do we need to pay to actually test everything thoroughly? You need to provide us with the premium plan, with an account on the premium plan, on the enterprise plan. You have to provide us with multiple roles. Give us everything that we need to test. That's probably one of the first requirements that we have for everyone. So accounts, working accounts, a lot of times, maybe not a lot of times, but oftentimes we are provided with accounts that are not working or not have been set up properly. So there's a little bit of back and forth in the beginning when it comes to testing roles and permissions. But that's one of the first things that you have to establish.
Do you use some templates, some checklists for this part of the process?
Well, actually, yes. So first off is the Web Security Testing Guide by OWASP, the checklist. I recently made a version of it, made what I think it's an optimized version of it, and I posted it on GitHub. It's a checklist with about 130 items on it. It's, as its name says, Web Security Testing Guide. It's actually quite comprehensive. OWASP are quite on point with their stuff, with the API security, with the web security. These are go-to. So for someone who's starting in pen testing and doesn't have any colleagues to actually guide them how it all works, these are starting points. These are documents that you want to have with you at all times for all the pen tests that are specific to web apps and API stuff. But of course, throughout the years, I have my own, I've developed alongside these, I have my own methodology where I actually usually know where to look for and what types of vulnerabilities are most encountered and are of quite high impact.
Okay, and so we have OWASP testing guide. That's definitely something to recommend for people. Do you also use other checklists or other documents by OWASP?
No, so it's just the Web Security Testing Guide. I don't actually, they might have methodologies for, I don't know, maybe infrastructure testing. They also have the mobile application, the MSTG, the Mobile Security Testing Guide. I do know of it. I actually referenced it I'm referencing it a lot when I test mobile apps, but it's not as a first-hand reference document as VSTGs, for example, and the one involving API security. And of course, there's the cheat sheet series by OWASP, which is really, really good, all in one website. These are very good go-to references. Of course, there's also the Hack Tricks book, which is really good. So as someone who's working in pen testing as a pen tester, these are some of the documents that I use myself.
Okay, these are great. People save these because these are really, really good resources for me. Also, when I'm testing a vulnerability, one of the first resources that I go to is Hack Tricks to see, copy the basic payload, see other references and stuff like this. So it's really, really, really good and really big as well. Like the amount of information that's there on different topics, because it's not only web vulnerabilities. I think there's now also cloud. There are different ports described. It's really, really extensive.
It's all in one place. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what are the most common findings that you encounter during pen tests?
Okay. So, probably the most encountered are low-hanging fruits such as user enumeration, issues with cookies, session tokens not being invalidated, overexposure of information. These are the low-hanging fruits, like server headers and all that stuff. These are, I mean, you could put these in a pen test, in a report, but nobody's going to accept this as a finding in a bug bounty program. And these are all out of scope unless you somehow show impact that they could negatively affect the asset or the company or the business. So, but these are actually relatively valid findings on pen tests. But of course, these are the most common findings. You don't want to focus on these because you want to deliver good work. So most of the findings, most of the impact findings that I have to do with broken access control, authorization, authentication issues, authentication bypass, other bypasses, these that impact people, that actually have an impact on the underlying infrastructure. There's also, I see a lot of SSRF. There's a lot of, I see a lot of SSRF in my findings. I also see there's still XSS. I don't actually, in bug bounty hunting, I don't look for XSS, but in pen testing, I find XSS, and I also find XSS even in apps that actually use frameworks. So it's hard to explain. I cannot even explain it to myself why this was there, for example. So XSS is still present. I don't like it, but it's still there. Other injection issues, a lot of stuff that has to do with business logic. Business logic is where you actually have to understand what the application is meant to do and how can you make it do something that is not been meant to do with an impact, with a security impact. This is probably one of the types of vulnerabilities that's gonna belong there even in the age of AI, because you cannot find it with scanners, you cannot find it with automation. You have to think through the entire process. For example, the authentication flow, something might be disrupted there. And if you actually look at it closely, try to understand it, you'll probably find something that's not working as intended. Also, rate limiting stuff. These could be high or low impact. I've seen instances where bypassing rate limits has had high impacts. For example, when there's a multi-factor authentication, you get a code, and that code is brute forceable. That's a high impact issue, because if you're able to brute force the MFA for any account, it's account takeover. So it's still the Wild West there.
Yeah, it's something that as a inexperienced pen tester, I thought about the rate limiting bug as a lame vulnerability class, but yeah, in the context of OTP, it's basically an account takeover. So we also have seen bounties of, I don't know, $20 or maybe even $50,000 for those, and I'm not surprised. And I also definitely agree with the thing you said about the business logic bugs. Like many vulnerability classes will probably be fixed with time with better scanners, because I don't know, SQL injection is very easy to fix by just spot by looking at the code and then by fix even automatically. But XSS, I think, has many contexts, and that's probably the reason why it's still so prevalent. But still, the number of contexts is limited, and scanners do get better over time. But I think authorization bugs, IDORs, business logic bugs, they do require the context, and it's very difficult for a scanner to understand this context. So I think these are vulnerabilities that if people learn, they will just be more and more impactful over time as the general number of vulnerabilities, I hope, will go down.
Yeah, I mean, but we also still hope that we will have some work to do in the future as well. So if the number goes down, we have to find other ways that we can position ourselves as valued assets in the entire ecosystem of the business, for example. I don't think that over the long term, all cybersecurity issues are going to be fixed by AI or by something else, because there's always the human component where things go wrong. We can see this with all the breaches that occur on an ongoing basis where credentials are leaked, high impact credentials are leaked, for example, from a developer or from someone, even in the context of, for example, GitHub having all sorts of checks and implementations on their platform when people deploy code. There are still leaks occurring, and I think this is going to be quite hard to prevent unless we put everything in the hands of AI, which I don't think that's actually doable at least in the near future.
Yeah, probably not.
Hopefully
Yeah, but
not.
speaking of, do you use AI during your hacking?
Yeah, so I used it a lot. I actually use it quite extensively when it comes to minute stuff such as scripting, graphing, one-liners. I used to before ChatGPT 4 because I don't think ChatGPT 3.5 is decent. I don't think it is decent, but ChatGPT 4 is quite good and it actually understands what you want, even if you cannot express it exactly what you want. You put in something there, half a request, and it actually understands what you want, or at least that's what my version of ChatGPT 4 with my system prompt is actually doing for me. So I use it a lot when it comes to scripting, one-liners, bash stuff. It's saving me tremendous amount of time because it actually took maybe 1, 2, 3 hours, for example, in the past when I had to do something custom, and I would actually have to look into Stack Overflow, see what other people did, adapt it to my own personal situation, and now it's a matter of 30 seconds to 2 minutes, maybe at most, until I get the answer.
Yeah, it definitely saves a lot of time. How about regular tools? Normally, when we're talking about bug bounties, I don't even ask about automatic scanners because I don't believe that they are worth. Even if they can find something, it's probably a duplicate. But in context of pen testing, do you use any scanners?
Scanners? No, I don't use scanners.
Nothing.
No. So I mean the go-to. I used to be the recon guy back in when I started looking into bug bounties, but I'm actually doing maybe, for example, specifically for bug bounties, maybe I do 10% of my scanning is recon, and only with the purpose of increasing the attack surface. This should be, I just had this thought a few days ago. The whole purpose of recon, and I have a recon course that it's free on YouTube now. The whole purpose of recon should be to increase the attack surface and not actually to find bugs. There might be people who actually keep finding bugs with recon, but the majority of them are not. So the whole purpose of recon, I think it should be to increase the attack surface. Now, when it comes to pen testing, I mean, the tool that I use the most is Burp Suite. So, for example, web stuff, web apps, that's Burp Suite. That's probably paid its Burp Suite probably paid, or my findings with Burp Suite probably paid its investment, its pro version multiple times over. So it's one of the best investments ever. So it's all Burp Suite.
Yeah. What are your favorite Burp extensions?
Autorize. What else? OwnFox.
What's that?
It's a colorizer for sessions.
Okay.
For example, if you're using Firefox with multiple containers, each container has its own color in burp history, and it's very useful when you're testing for different roles and permissions. So autorize in combination with ownfox and multi-containers in Firefox, this is a very good combination. I tested other extensions, but I usually spend my time in the repeater and analyzing stuff with these three, with this environment of the three extensions, or the two extensions that I told you about. I looked into miner plugins, for example, JS miners that actually grab endpoint, but I rather actually spend my time looking into the code myself instead of having a parser go through the JS file, because if I'm looking into the code myself, I can actually understand stuff. I can actually maybe understand the logic behind a function. And that's something that no extension or tool is gonna, unless you plug the entire code into ChatGPT or some AI. But I don't think it can still keep the entire context and give you good findings. For example, an AI tool. That's why I choose to do it manually. Going back to the extensions, I think that there's also the GraphQL. There's a GraphQL extension. I can't remember from the top of my head.
Maybe GraphQL Rider?
I think so, which adds a tab to all the requests where you can actually better edit the GraphQL request, for example. Yeah, this is the cream, so to speak, of extensions.
Yeah, okay. And you also told me before that you do some mobile hacking or mobile pen testing. What's your setup for this?
Yeah, well, the setup is a bit more complex. So you have to have I do. So in the bug bounty program that I've been working on in 2023, they also have an app, a mobile app, and luckily I can test it on my own device because it doesn't have. It's made for testing. It doesn't have SSL pinning, and I can test it on my non-rooted phone.
Okay.
But it usually involves having an emulator, for example. I also have an iPhone for testing iPhone apps. I've tested iPhone apps in the past. So the testing usually involves an emulator, for example, like it used to be Genymotion, but I think it's very heavy in terms of, and non-convenient, for example. Right now it's Nox. So Nox is really good, really easy to set up. Nox, you have to have installed ADB to be able to bridge between your laptop. There's also, of course, there's Frida. So the setup is comprised of Nox, Frida, your laptop, of course, and Burp Suite. This is for dynamic testing. So when you're testing actually the communication of the app with the API, because it usually involves a communication with an API. Of course, there's also looking into the code itself, decompiling the app. For this, for example, you can use APK Studio, which is a GUI, graphical user interface tool that you can decompile the app, try to get the sources, and look into the code itself. Sometimes the app is obfuscated and it's not as straightforward, but it usually works. So then you have that component. You also have to look into the device security itself. So how is the information or the data stored on the device itself? Where is it stored? Is it stored in plain text? You usually look into the data folder, the name of the app. You look into the shared preferences. Inside the shared preferences, there's also leak stuff. There's also the cache folder in the app folder. There's also the database folder, the files folder. That has to do with, if you look into MSTG Mobile Security Testing Guide, it's gonna give you more insights on the device itself, or the data that's on the device, the security of that. Of course, there's also quirks like, if you are able, so let's say a company wouldn't accept your submission because they don't accept rooted devices as part of the scope. So they say that if you're able to extract solid information from the app or from the user or from the phone without having a rooted phone, then your submission is valid. But there's also the situation where the manifest file allows backups. So if you're able to, if you're dealing with a non-rooted device and you're able to back up the app, move the backup onto another device, the backup usually is going to include the data folder, which is only accessible by root. So when you're actually extracting the backup from a non-rooted device, you're getting the information that's only available to the root. So if there's sensitive information in there, that's a valid, impactful finding. And there are a lot of situations where the manifest allows, where you can see the manifest that allow backup is set to true. And that's a security issue.
Okay, for the context of bug bounty, how can bug hunters use mobile apps to get bounties? Is it mostly listening to the web traffic using the mobile app, and maybe the app uses some APIs that the web application doesn't use? Or is there also a lot of like mobile attack surface that is severe enough for a bounty finding?
Okay, so yeah, there is mobile attack surface that's not readily available to most testers, because that attack surface often involves coding your own exploit app, for example, to exploit intents, to exploit components of the Android system that would actually compromise the application ecosystem itself. So if you're able to actually trigger something in the app from another app due to not well configured permissions, due to bad intents, that's something that's not readily available to most pen testers, or most bug bounty hunters, for example. But yes, of course, listening to the traffic, looking at the communication, that's probably, in the context of bug bounties, that's probably where a lot of the findings are going to be, even if it's a little bit not easy to set up. Once you have set it up, it's quite convenient to look into the communication. Of course, stuff that's on the device itself, or stuff that most people can do with the click of a button, like, for example, decompiling the app and looking for strings, that's probably not gonna, you won't have good findings in programs, in solid programs, because most of them know that they shouldn't share their secret keys, their API keys, their credentials inside the apps. Most of them have already been found. Most of that stuff has already been found by pen testers. Usually companies with bug bounty programs, with solid established bug bounty programs, have harder to find static related vulnerabilities when it comes to mobile apps. So communication API, the communication, the traffic, analyzing that is probably one of the best ways to go.
Okay. Okay. And in the context of regular website hacking, web security, how is your hacking style different when pen testing versus doing bug bounty?
Well, in pen testing, it's much easier because in pen testing, you often have the exclusivity. Most often than not, you have the exclusivity. You have the first eyes, first privy eyes, first security oriented glasses on the infrastructure itself. So you often find permissions where a normal user can do admin stuff. This is a common find in the pen tests. But in bug bounties, you often have to look deeper, especially if you're hunting on programs that a lot of hunters are already hunting on as well. Like, for example, public programs or I think right now it's mostly about private programs. Everybody is invited to private programs, but still in private programs, from my experience, I know that companies have already done their due diligence in their public programs because most of not most, but a large portion of private programs, they also have a public program. The public program is often used as a funnel to get people into the private programs as well. So not only that, but also the fact that those companies have also had multiple rounds of pen tests on their assets. So it's not going to be as easy. You have to have a little bit different approach, often involving going deeper into the functions, going deeper into the features, going deeper into permissions. That's where the bread and butter is. And of course, looking into the business logic. I think business logic is probably one of the best ways that you would go when you are competing with others.
Okay, that's a good tip. I like to think about pen testing versus bug bounty as short distance and long distance running. Like from the outside, like both pen testers and bug bounty hunters hack web applications. Both marathon runners and sprinters run, but in reality there are a lot of difference in both of these activities. And probably a person with better endurance will be better off in long distance running. A stronger, taller person will be better for sprints. And my question is, people with what features will feel better doing pen testing, and people with what features will be better off in doing bug bounty hunting?
I'm not sure if I understand completely. So you're actually asking what are the features that are actually most certain to get you into a vulnerability.
Okay, I will give you an example. In bug bounty, you don't have a boss, so naturally people that are more self-organized and can organize the time themselves, they will do better in bug bounty. A person that needs a boss will do better in pen testing. That's one of the obvious things that.
So specifically for features, or specifically for what exactly? Because of course, let's say that in pen tests you also have, as you said, you can view this as a sprinter or a marathoner. For example, you often act as a sprinter in pen testing because you have a timeline, and it's best if you can deliver something impactful in that timeline. because even though some customers might actually be on it just for the paperwork, just for their compliance testing, and they don't actually care about their findings. There are a lot of companies that don't care about their pen testing findings. You have to deliver something if you want that customer or that client to come back to you. So it's a matter of time there. Now, when it comes to, of course, when it comes to bug bounties, you have the luxury of doing it for how long you want. But then there's also the component of losing motivation, which is often the case. So, in the context of bug bounties, you probably have to try to think a little bit differently than everybody else, because as bad as it sounds, there's a tendency, there's a groupthink, not only in cybersecurity, in pen testing, in bug bounty hunting, but in most of the fields, there's this concept of groupthink. Everybody using the same tools, the same tactics, the same one-liners. So in bug bounties, you have to, if you go slightly differently, chances are that you're going to find something.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I'm not sure if this answers your question.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Okay.
We're closing into the end of our interview. So, but let's talk before we end about some non-technical stuff. Because I saw on Twitter you have an amazingly impressive streak of 1,100 days on Duolingo. How on earth do you keep this up for so long?
Well, it's simple. I mean, it's on my to-do list for every day. So that's one of the things, that's one of the streaks that I have to take care of every day. And there are days when I just do the streak, do the work that counts for the streak. And there are other days when I have more time and spend more time on the platform. I think it all boils down to consistency. Consistency, you can ensure consistency by having checks, for example. In this case, a simple checklist maintains the consistency. A very simple to-do list. Today I must do Duolingo, Brilliant, TryHackMe, Web Security Academy for whatever amount of time. Through time, doing this for 2 or 3 weeks or 1 month, I can understand how long does it take me to actually do these in any given day, and then adapt accordingly, whether or not I want to focus more onto one than to another. So it's just simple checklist. It's a matter of checklist to maintain consistency. And of course, as you see results through time, you're going to be more motivated to maintain that consistency or streak in this case.
Yeah, now it would be really painful to break this streak.
Well, sometimes the apps are actually make it easier for you to lose a day. For example, if I lose a day on Duolingo, I'm not actually gonna lose everything because they have streak freeze. So
Okay.
you can lose your streak for 2 or 3 or 4, and in my case right now for 5 days in a row.
Okay.
And they're actually gonna maintain my streak due to my 5-day streak freeze. But there are situations where that's not the case. Like, for example, when it comes to the Kindle with reading.
Yeah.
If you lose your streak, it's hard to actually get it back. It's possible, but it's hard. I think that TryHackMe also has lets you lose your streak for 1 day or something.
Okay, this one I didn't know. Do you always do these habits at a particular time of the day, or do you group them together, or how does it look like?
Yeah. So if I look back in the recent past, I can see that I usually do them in the first part of the day, so up until noon. I actually do Try Hack Me. Then I also do, upon waking, I think I do Duolingo and Brilliant. And the reading in the second part of the day. First off, I'm doing the reading. I have to read a couple of pages on Kindle just to get the streak. And the streak is better. If I read on Kindle at 9 a.m., chances are that they're not going to count that day for me, because I think their timer is, their base time is in San Francisco or in LA, where my 9 a.m. it's the previous day there. So
Yeah,
I have to make sure that I read later in the day so that I have the streak.
that's interesting.
And this is actually, I've seen this through trial and error. For example, through losing my streak.
Okay. What happens when you have a really bad day? Like, I don't know, a hangover, you're really tired, you don't feel like doing anything. How do you keep those habits then?
Well, first off, luckily, thank God, I didn't have a bad day in a long time. I didn't have a hangover. I don't know how many years it's been.
Okay.
I do drink alcohol, like, very infrequently, extremely infrequently, have a glass or two of wine. But when I have a bad day, for example, due to other reasons, it's not taking me long to do my work for the day. In an hour, I can do all the necessaries that I have to do in the day, and whatever else is after that, it's optional. So I can just take in the bad day as it is, or try to fight it and actually try to win over it. Because it often happens that you have a bad day starting, but with efficient struggle, you can get over it and win the day by the end of the day. This can happen as well.
Okay. Okay, that's great. And my final question is, what are you looking forward to achieve in 2024?
2024 depends. I mean, I actually depends on what area of life, because it's not all about. I try to pursue objectives in all areas of my life. When it comes to career, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to health, when it comes to emotional well-being, for example. So if we're strictly speaking about career-wise, expertise-wise, cybersecurity oriented, I want to at least achieve the performance of this year, which has been, it's going to be hard to beat.
Okay.
So it's going to be hard to, what my personal performance this year is going to be hard to beat. So hopefully I can, if I get to 70% of it, I'm going to say, okay, it was a good year. But my goal is to go over it. So
Okay.
I'm shooting for going over my performance in terms of first off, the quality and the number of pen tests, the number of clients that I have. So my focus is going to be specifically on numbers here, and numbers plus the quality. And this also has to do with my level of expertise. And I'm actually going to try to get better into some areas that I see that I'm most interested in, such as authorization, authentication, broken access controls. These are my favorites, but when you're dealing with the pen test, you have to include everything that has, so you're testing through a methodology. I cannot just deliver authorization issues to a pen test, because that's against the methodology. I'm testing against OWASP top 10 usually. If you're dealing with mobile, with banking applications, with fintech stuff, you're also using other methodologies. but where actually I don't want to diverge too much from the main subject. So I want to get better in terms of my expertise so that I can maybe get more clients and do as many pen tests. This is strictly speaking for pen tests. When it comes to bug bounty hunting, I think I'm taking this. I want to keep focusing on the same program and actually try to become specialized in the area that company actually operates. So
Okay.
I don't want to be. I know what I don't want to be. I don't want to be shooting for the leaderboards. I don't want to be in the top 10. I want to actually become very good at one thing, specifically in this case for that program. And if I get interest in other programs, but I saw that if I focus on one program alone, I can find vulnerabilities that their team of dozens of security engineers didn't find in the years their assets are on. So that's a very strong point for me. That's a very strong motivator for me. If I can find stuff that their teams of security engineers didn't find, I'm all in for that.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a very good one. And also, if you're aiming for 70% of what you achieved this year, it means you had a really, really good year. So congratulations on that. And thank you so much for joining me in today's chat. If viewers are interested in following you for more stuff, where do they go?
On Twitter.
You are?
On Twitter. So Cristi Vlad 25.
Cristi Vlad 25? Okay, that's perfect.
Yeah.
We will also link this down in the description. And once again, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you're hungry for more, I recommend you this one with Shabs about source code review, which is helpful both for pen testing and for bug bounty.